I'm the Rek'Sai. Welcome to the very first in a series dedicated to mastering Rek'Sai jungle. If you're new to the champ, let's talk about where she shines. And simply put, that's ganking. That's why I figured there's no better topic to start the series on. We're going to cover what I feel are the most important things that every Rek'Sai should know to make quick, clear, and informed decisions in an easy to understand way. In part 1, we'll discuss the when and why of ganking. We want to understand why we gank, and how to get the most impact out of each gank. And in part 2, we'll break down the how of ganking. We'll talk about the stages of a gank, and how you'll maximize your chances of success. Stick till the end, and I promise you'll leave with foundational knowledge you can immediately apply to your games. With that, let's begin. We'll start by asking the question, when and why do we gank? You'll be asking yourself this question all throughout the game, but we need to start with the matchups. Considering the champions in the game is the first step to making informed decisions, and since Rek'Sai is such an early gank-heavy champion, figuring this out early is even more important on her than many other champions. We're going to spend time focusing on being in the right place at the right time, especially in the opening. We're going to try our best to guess how each lane will go. We're never going to be able to control exactly what our laners do in solo queue. Your pathing will always be a guess, but there are markers to pay attention to if you want to make as educated of a guess as you possibly can. We can start by looking for crowd control on your team and escape abilities on the enemy team. Focus heavily on this. Your goal in the early game is to get either you or your team a kill. It just makes sense that you want to path to lanes that'll help you get those kills, right? I'll leave some champs here so you can have a general idea of who's easy and who's harder to gank. This is subjective in a way, but try to consider why I placed each champion in each column, and ask yourself how you'd feel about other champions in the game. Now we consider the lane volatility. And what I mean by that is really how much action is going to be going on in each lane. If your bot lane matchup is Ezreal Yuumi and they're against the Caitlyn Soraka, they might not be fighting too much early. They're far away and they're going to heal and shield any damage that actually does get done. It's pretty likely by the time you get to them, they're still full HP. If you gank, you might burn a flash, but the likelihood of you killing them with only one hard CC being you is pretty slim. Instead, let's take a look top lane. Here we have a Riven versus Aurelia top lane, and both of them have Ignite. Who wins the matchup? Honestly, your guess is as good as mine, and I don't think they know either. This is an example of a melee versus a melee matchup where both laners have to kind of get up close and personal whenever they want to CS. The lane is what I would consider extremely volatile, and you being there level 3 might be the difference between a winning 5-0 top laner and a losing 0-5 top laner. And finally, and still before you even load into the game, briefly consider the enemy runes and summoner spells. It's really the easiest thing to ignore, but all you need to do is acknowledge them before the game and look for anything that might be out of the ordinary. That information can directly affect where you path and gank. For example, if I see an enemy Camille took Ignite and Teleport, if I see her use movement abilities randomly, I might remember that she has no flash, and I can easily engage on her. Or if I see the enemy Master Yi took Halo Blades and Ignite, maybe I should make a mental note and not try to auto-attack battle him. Really try to think about the matchups in any way you can at the start of every single game. Be prepared to compare your assumptions of what you think will happen to what does happen. Reflect and try to improve in the next game. Now you're going to take that knowledge and make your first real decision as a jungler. Where do you start your clear? In general, and without going too deep into jungle pathing, because this is a ganking video, not a jungle pathing video, you want to start at the opposite side of the map from where you would like to gank first. That means if I want to gank top first, I'll start on my bot side camps, clear my 3 camps, and then move to top side, clear those 3 camps, and then gank up, or do the opposite. If I want to gank bot first, I'll start at my top side camps, clear my top quadrant, then my bot quadrant, and then gank bot. Okay, let's recap where we're at. You looked at the matchups, decided to side of the map to path into, and you're approaching your first gank. Here we gotta ask again, when and why should we gank? Okay, to answer that, let's take a step back and look at how lanes work, because as a jungler, you really do need to understand at least the bare basics of wave states. Know that lane states are dependent almost entirely on where the minion wave is and how many minions are on each side. We're gonna simplify a little bit and say for our purposes, there are 3 types of lane states: even, pushed out, and pushed in. Each yields a type of gank too: medium, high, and low impact ganks respectively. That sounds like a lot, but let me explain and I promise it all makes sense. We can start with a medium impact gank. This is when the minion waves are even and no one has a push on one another. If you gank here and get a kill, you and your teammate can just push the wave in and try to deny the enemy a couple minions. But since the wave was even, the enemy only is really going to lose like about a wave or so. Instead, let's say you have a push-in wave and you're setting up for what's called a high impact gank. Here, your team has a really large minion advantage. You're looking to push into the enemy turret, and instead of letting the enemy hide in your tower and collect the wave, you're going to try to dive and kill them. If you do kill them, they're going to miss out on that entire massive stacked wave, and not only do you deny the minions, but you can also take tower plate gold immediately after that. Successfully pulling off those kinds of ganks, those high impact ganks, are what gives you like a massive 1,000 gold swing. And finally, on the opposite end, we have low impact ganks. So here, your team is the one that's pushed in. And if the enemy has already pushed their wave into your tower and you do kill them, they won't really lose any minions because you won't have time to push your wave all the way under their tower before they're back. So that's not to say there's no time to ever do a low impact gank. Sometimes you really need to save your teammate from dying. Now, here you can recognize we have a low impact gank since the minions are pushing into our tower. And since I know Darius wants to dive the half-health Aatrox, denying Aatrox a bunch of minions, 2 whole waves, I can make a low-impact gank here, saving my teammate from a really unpleasant situation. Try to keep in mind, a low-impact gank for your team is a high-impact gank for the enemy team. Now that we know the types of ganks, let's look at how we can transition one type of gank into the other. Let's look at how we can bring a medium-impact gank into a high-impact gank. So here you can see it's a medium impact gank because the wave states are pretty even when I first arrive. This is a pretty standard counter jungle. I know that Shaka is going to try to make a bot play, and so I want to be there to affect it. After we get the first 2 kills, it transitions from a medium impact gank into a high impact gank because we have that push going. That's why I stick around and make sure I get this dive. I queue onto the Jhin to make sure I take turret aggro for my team collects the kills, and I leave. Jin's losing not only this wave under the tower right now, but the next one that's coming in as well. The point I'm trying to make is most of the time denying the enemy for a bunch of experience and gold through minions is worth more than the actual kill itself. Whew, okay, we got through it. Now that we know the when and why you should gank, let's move on to the how. We're going to break this up into 3 different stages. The entrance, the execution, and finally, the exit. So if you want to be successful in the entrance, the first barrier to pass is going to be vision. Vision's either going to be your best friend or your worst enemy, depending on how well you're aware of it. When you're moving around the jungle and you're clear, you cannot be wasting time just staring at your character. You need to be checking the minimap and checking for signs that someone's stepping away to ward, especially the lanes you're pathing to. When you're unsure if they have vision, this is when sweeper is important. I go sweeper every single game on Rek'Sai jungle, and the reason being is that if you're worried about getting invaded on one of your jungle camps, then just press W and look for tremors. Rek'Sai can see over walls pretty much, so denying vision is way more important than doubling down on getting vision for yourself. Let's keep in mind as well that the more aware you are of where enemies ward, the less you'll have to actually use your sweeper. This way, you can use it where it matters and not be wasting it on nothing. Another way to use vision is by keeping note of where the enemy vision lines are. Bad wards are going to give your opponent a false sense of security that you're going to want to abuse. When you enter a gank, you want to make sure that you're standing in the most extreme angle you can to gank as you can get away with. Take the time to move all the way to the edge of the enemy vision before you begin your approach. Now that you understand this, we can take a little bit of time to talk about approach angles that I use. So, tunnels are a bit of a fan favorite, but I can't go through all of them. Each have their own nuance in when you should use them and how you should use them. I'll probably end up making a dedicated video just on tunnels, but I'd like to just quickly show some of them for quick reference. The thing is, the reason you go for these little cheeky tunnels is because the enemy has vision of the normal area you'd want to walk through. In an ideal world, when they don't have vision, you want to just be able to walk into lane and save your E cooldown before you even begin your engage. That's probably a good way to transition into the second stage, the execution. So here I want to stress the importance of saving that tunnel cooldown for when it's actually necessary. One of, if not the most common mistakes I see in ganking is a lack of patience on movement abilities. In general, you want to only use it after the enemy has used a movement ability for themselves. If you can get on them without blowing your cooldown, you should almost always do that instead. There's some exceptions to the rule, like if you want to look at this clip where I'm playing Jarvan in ranked. Here you'll notice, since Vlad has pull up, I want to use my movement ability immediately to burn his pool. This way, when my Bard comes to gank, they can easily get a stun without having to worry about pool. If I had waited and instead tried to approach normally like I would, Vlad would just pull and dodge both Bard and me at the same time. Continuing with the tunnel, I want to go over buffering real quick. This is when you use the travel time of your tunnel to negate the effects of enemy crowd control. This will work on any kind of CC except for displacements. This is going to be particularly useful on champions like Zyra, Lux, and Twisted Fate that rely on their CC abilities to keep you at bay. Next, we can talk a bit about the timing on the execution. So a great time to start a gank engage is when the minions are either walking up, because people will walk up with a minion wave, or when the enemy is moving in to get a last hit. People will do pretty desperate things to get a last hit, so look for those kind of timing windows. Understanding timing is also really essential for counter ganks. Your best window is to commit after the enemy full commits themselves. Rek'Sai is really one of the strongest disruptors in 2v2 and 3v3s, and in this example, I see Briar on my tremors, so I know she's looking for a top gank. I wait and wait and wait, and only after she full commits do I commit myself. If I went in too early, they probably would have just backed away. We can look at another example from the exact same game. Here, as I'm running to my red side, I notice that Briar just pops up on a ward briefly, so I come in for the counter gank. Notice how I don't take my tunnel immediately when she's on it, and I wait for her to use her ability and commit before I go in. I've always said that Rek'Sai's at her strongest on a secondary engage. So if it's your team engaging or the enemy team engaging, being the second person in there is really strong. This way you disrupt them, nuke their health bars, and they can't respond since they've already committed their abilities on someone else. Last for the execution, I want to go over the vital importance of lending her burrowed Q. Rek'Sai's fast combo relies on her going burrowed Q, knock up, auto, Q auto, and then finally empowered E. When done correctly, the enemy won't have time to flash before you get the full combo off. Even if they do flash at the end, the empowered E will still hit. You need to use all the power and make sure you're getting that empowered E off before you do the combo. Seriously, this is one of the most important habits you need to start building. Now for the last stage, but certainly not least, the exit. Getting the kill does not mean your job is done. You need to look at the minion wave and make a decision. Push or leave it be. To simplify, let's say that you should push when you can completely crash the wave into the enemy tower, and leave it be when you can't. Watch out in this example, after the gank I immediately run to help push the wave. This allows my low health Misfortune to get a recall off as quickly as possible. You can tell a wave is crashed when all the minions are focusing their attacks on the enemy tower. Watch how as the enemy minion wave comes in, they start to bunch together and target my team's minions. Keep an eye out on this minion right over here. Since the enemy wave is now bunched up, they will target this first minion, while my team's wave will split the damage up across multiple minions. This will naturally push out the wave into my team, even if Jinx wasn't here. Since we crashed as quickly as you could, Misfortune only misses 2 minions from a reset. Now we can check when not to push. Let's say this is the moment we get the kill. Your low health and mana ADC probably just wants to base and let the wave naturally push back into your team. You have the bunch, right? And a minion advantage. If your ADC matches the recall timing with the enemy's death timer, they'll arrive back in lane around the same time. The difference is, Jhin has a huge wave to collect while Jinx is out here trying to collect scraps. Knowing what you do with the wave as a jungler is as important as getting the kill itself. You need to be setting your teammates up for success and denying enemies resources. Alright, that's it. Or at least everything I could fit in 15 minutes. If you made it this far, I hope you learned something. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more Rek'Sai content. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll try to answer everything I can. You can also find me on Twitch, where I'll be streaming every Thursday through Saturday.